Inflation has been plaguing the United States and global economy over the last couple of years. What's it going to take to bring inflation down? There's a couple key components of inflation and what drives prices up and down, but one of the most important is energy, specifically oil prices. And now you might be wondering, how can oil possibly still be contributing to inflation nowadays, especially with all the green energy projects that have been going on, all the investments into green energy? But the truth of the matter is, the United States and the global economy are still very dependent on oil. Hate it or love it, the point of this video is to discuss how oil prices are hinged directly to inflation. And as energy and oil prices go up, inflation goes up. And as they come down, prices of almost everything comes down. And to get a little context, let's review this 5-year chart of oil prices. On the left-hand side, there's a red circle that represents oil prices before the pandemic. And as you can see, prices back then were about $55 to $60 a barrel before falling off a cliff. And that's because almost all modes of travel were shut down and the economy came to a halt. But in the following 2 years, you can see that there was a rapid increase in oil prices. And this is for two reasons. First, after being locked down for months on end, there was massive demand for people to get out there and travel and do things. And second, the Biden administration wanted to rapidly move the US economy away from fossil fuels. So he shut down all kinds of drilling and pipeline projects. And if companies are not pumping oil, that means there's only so much oil to go around. And with demand going up and supply rapidly going down, this led to a massive increase in oil prices from $25 to $120 a barrel in less than 2 years. And during that same 2-year time frame, you can see here on this chart, we had the worst inflation in almost 40 years. Now, let's not kid ourselves. There were other factors that contributed to inflation, such as the Federal Reserve dropping interest rates to zero and trillions of government stimulus. But for this video, we're just going to be focusing on oil and its effect on inflation. And what you're going to take away from this is when oil prices go up, transportation costs go up. So now, without further ado, let's jump right into it. I'm drawing up the most basic supply chain visuals right here. On the left-hand side, we have factories where products are made. In the middle, we have shipping and delivery services that get those products to stores. And finally, on the right-hand side, that's the consumer buying that final product in the store. All right, now that this is all drawn up, let's review this supply chain. The example up top is where oil prices are higher, and down below, oil prices are lower. And at the top, where oil prices are higher, delivery and shipping costs are going to be going up. That's because most vehicles still run on fossil fuels. Vans, box trucks, planes, you name it. And at the bottom, where oil prices are lower, the delivery and shipping companies are not going to have to go up in their prices because the fuel that they're using is still cheap. Now, the constant for this is that the factory charges $5 to make a pair of shoes, regardless of what oil prices are. And at the top, the delivery and shipping company comes to the factory, picks up those shoes, and brings them to the store. But since oil prices are higher, that shipping and delivery company is going to have to charge more for that. So to offset those costs, the store that you would go to buy those shoes at are going to have to increase their prices to maintain their profit margins. And the cost to make these shoes, in the top example, is $5 for the shoes, $50 for shipping, meaning it costs $55 to make a pair of shoes, leaving the final price of $75 that you, the customer, would have to pay. And at the bottom, where oil prices are lower, it's still $5 to make that pair of shoes, but only $25 to ship those shoes to the store, resulting in a lower price that you'd have to pay. And to track these oil prices, at the top, I've marked everything red. And as that higher oil price works its way through the supply chain, it's going to result in a higher cost for the customer at the end. The same goes for lower oil prices. On the bottom, I'm marking everything green to track those lower oil prices throughout the supply chain, resulting in a lower price for the customer at the end. And when oil prices go up, it's not just consumer goods like shoes and clothing that go up in price. Pretty much everything does. And one of the most frustrating things for consumers over the last couple of years is how expensive groceries have got. You can see here with eggs, beef, milk, you name it. And this supply chain inflation that's tied to oil and fuel prices can also be seen in places you sort of forget about. And one example of that could be future price hikes for delivery services like Amazon Prime. And that's because higher oil prices will mean it costs more for them to deliver stuff to you, and they'll need to offset that by charging customers more. So now, how is this going to affect you and your budget? Let's take a closer look at what someone's budget may look like when oil prices are high and when they're low. And as always, these are going to be smaller, more round numbers to make the point of this video easier to understand. So now let's take a look at Joe's budget. Joe's going to have $500 a month for bills. And we've closely studied what it's going to cost for shoes and groceries when oil prices are high and when they're low. And once again, at the top, things are more expensive because oil prices are higher. And at the bottom, things are going to be cheaper because oil prices are lower. And at the top, shoes are going to cost $75 and groceries are $200, leaving Joe with $225 at the end of the month. And at the bottom, everything's going to be cheaper because oil prices are lower. And Joe is going to be left with $300 at the end of the month. That's a difference of $75 more in Joe's bank account when oil prices are lower. And before we close this video out, here's a couple of the downstream side effects also caused by inflation. And while the cause of inflation varies throughout history, the negative impact it has on the middle class is always the same. And now back to our example. When oil prices are lower, Joe is going to have an extra $75 a month. And here's a couple of things that Joe can do with that extra money. First, he can build up an emergency savings fund. Everybody has to deal with car repairs, home repairs, you name it. So if he has extra money every month, he can start to build up an emergency fund. Second, he can start to pay down debt sooner. Paying off debt alleviates stress, which then leads to a happier life. Studies have been done that show paying off debt improves health outcomes. And this is why Dave Ramsey is so famous for promoting a debt-free life. And finally, Joe could invest that money. Investing $75 a month into the stock market with an average return of 10% a year for 30 years would leave Joe with $148,000 after 30 years. But when inflation is high, saving money, paying down debt, and investing becomes harder for most people. And that's a wrap for this video. I hope it's helped you see how higher oil and energy prices lead to inflation and how that can put a financial stress on people. A lot of time goes into making these videos, but I created this channel to discuss all things economics and finance to help people just like you. So if you found this video helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel for all my upcoming videos just like this.